How is everybody doing? Strength Chat episode 122, and today I have got a very special guest for you. I last spoke to this guy way back in episode 82 and have followed his work since. Today I am joined by the founder of Performance RX and the lead instructor for the McGill Trainer courses, as well as being an all-round top fella. Today I am joined by Joel Proskewitz. How are you doing?
Steve, I'm very well. Thank you very much. And when you sent me the email last week asking me if I'd come on to be a guest again, I was very taken aback. So obviously the people that listened to my first podcast, what did you say? It was episode 82.
Yeah.
They obviously like to hear what I had to say. So I'm very honored to be back on your podcast. Thank you very much.
I felt like I had to give the people what they wanted. So it was good to. Thank you for taking the time to jump back on. Since we last spoke, and with everything that's been going on, how are you? What have you been up to? What's been happening since?
Steve, a lot has happened in the last year. So naturally, I've been on the road quite a bit with my team from Backfit Pro. That's Professor Stuart McGill and my colleague, Dr. Ed Cambridge. And since we last spoke, we taught a McGill conference in Edmonton in Canada. And then earlier this year in 2020, we were in Australia for 2 weeks, which was outstanding. We taught a full McGill conference in Melbourne. And then the following weekend, we were in Sydney. Oh, and the Australian community were extremely receptive to what we had to say. They were a phenomenal bunch of trainers and clinicians to work with. We had a great time, and I was busy doing my own things as well between Edmonton and Australia. I teach for a group in the United States as well, and I was doing my own courses there. And I was literally 2 days away from boarding a plane to go teach in Dallas and Detroit when I got a call to say that COVID-19 has taken over, and I should stick my butt back down on my seat and not go anywhere.
Okay. And what's it been like with the projects and the courses that you're doing, that or would have been obviously now, have they been rearranged, or have you been doing them over Zoom or Skype, or how's that been going?
Interesting that you asked me that, Steve. So I've had a huge amount of requests from people who are wanting me to put my courses online. Now, I have a natural aversion towards social. Recently on doing Instagram lives and those type of things. And truth be told, Steve, I can do them, but it's not really the thing I want to do.
Yeah.
And I've decided to not put my courses online because at the end of the day, Steve, we're in an industry that's a high-touch industry, not a high-tech industry. And you can put a whole host of things online, but at the end of the day, what I'm trying to impart onto fellow personal trainers and coaches is the stuff that you can't communicate via technology. Yeah. It's the hands-on stuff. How to deal with the details. As you know, I've got a hashtag on my social media, and it's everything matters. And everything in my life when I deal with a client matters. So in other words, it starts off with my initial phone call with them and the questions that I'm asking them to actually determine as to whether I can assist them or not.
Yeah.
So my assessment actually starts on the very first time I have a communication with that client. And for me to put that stuff online, for me to take that minutia, it's impossible to teach it online, Steve. So essentially what I've done over the last 5 weeks is I've pulled back a little bit, and I've contemplated what the future holds for my business, Performance RX, and obviously the courses we teach at Backfit Pro. And Dr. McGill and I have been having lots of conversations back and forth just to determine how best to take everything forward. And in actual fact, it's been a good time for me to have introspection with regards to where this beautiful community of fitness professionals and clinicians should actually be going. Yeah. So you're not at any time soon going to see my courses just being splattered online. for everyone just to have. It's I deal with a very specific audience, and I need people to understand how I work and what I do, so that they can embrace that and include it into their training regimens or into their clinical practices as best as possible.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point to make. And when you say that we're in the industry of touching and hands-on, we've been doing for our standard members at the gym online classes, something relatively new to keep the membership engaged. And it's really tested how I speak and how I put things across, so people can understand it when they're doing exercises. But in the back of my mind, I'm really wanting to put my hands through the computer screen to be like, no, look, this is what I want you to do, because there's only I sometimes think that you can say something, but it doesn't always register with people, and everyone responds differently to different things. Whereas actually, putting people in a position or showing them or something like that is a very powerful tool to use, and especially with the work that you do, I can imagine it can be very hard to try and portray that through a computer screen when you're doing courses.
It is, Steve, and also if I hone that down now just to the requests that I've had for people or from people wanting me to assess them for their back pain online. What I've chosen to do is I haven't excluded them. I've communicated with them. However, we do a Skype session, and these are the people that I've never seen before. So these are people who are booked in to come and see me for an assessment. And what we've done is we've used the Skype as, or this Zoom or FaceTime, we've used it as an initial conversation to dig a little bit deeper and extract more details from them. So I've asked them certain questions which other clinicians and practitioners haven't asked them. I've been able to look at what they're doing from a movement perspective, but it's been very, very clear to them that at no stage am I offering them a very in-depth assessment. It's impossible to do so. And again, I've had this conversation with Dr. McGill, and it's impossible for us doing what we do to ever put our stuff online or our consultations online. As I say, it's more just a question of, well, you know what, I understand you're in lockdown for the next maybe 1 or 2 weeks. Let's take a look. People have asked me, can I refine the way that they're doing the McGill Big 3, or can I refine the way they're doing a squat? And yes, I can to a certain degree, because something that I always teach every trainer is that you need to hone your trainer's eye or your coach's eye. Because at the end of the day, you may have your hands, you may have your head, but you need your eyes to see things that other trainers miss all the time. So that has, it's allowed me to do those type of consultations online. But I must be honest, Steve, I can't wait for this all to finish so that we can get back to doing the things that we do best.
Yeah, absolutely. I literally had that conversation with one of the coaches that I work with, and he's involved in sports performance. So he's watching people running, so obviously looking at knee and foot position. And there's only so much that can be, when people send him clips to look over, when powerlifters send me things to look over, to get in sort of the trenches, if you like, and get in and coaching. And it's interesting, what you mentioned there about assessments, because with everything that's happened, everything has shifted more towards an online type of things. But that doesn't mean that everything can be on there. And especially when you mentioned about the assessments are really are very, very important. So you want to make sure that you're getting as much information as you can, and not missing things out, especially when if you're doing it over Zoom and they're doing sort of a self-assessment, they might miss things or not be able to do it as well. Which actually moves.
Steve, they'll always miss things.
Yeah,
they'll always miss.
Absolutely. And that that touches on the topic that and you mentioned it with the sort of everything matters. And obviously when you speak to clients as a coach, and you go on courses, and a lot of people mention that everything does matter. But when you say that statement, what does that actually mean to you, and what does that actually cover? From the assessment to training, what does that mean to you when you mention that?
Thank you for asking. A lot of people have asked me that question, and I've never had a platform or a public platform to answer what everything matters means. Essentially, to me, Steve, it came to me after many conversations that I had with my colleagues. That's Stu McGill and Ed Cambridge. And I realized that what we teach requires the clinician or the trainer to never dismiss any detail that the client shows. And I've expanded upon that. And what I mean by everything matters is everything matters with regards to, from the first conversation that I have with them to how I greet them when they come into my facility. Now, I deal with a whole host of people, Steve. I've dealt with people who are, very fragile individuals in their late 70s. To extremely robust individuals in their early 20s and even younger. Now, the way that I'm going to look and touch and even greet the person who's older and maybe in a little bit more of a fragile state is going to be very different to the way that I communicate things to the younger, robust person. And with regards to that, that sets up the environment for them to create a suitable outcome. And what I mean by that, Steve, is that if I create a very threatening environment, because what you got to realize is that people come and see me, and the very first thing they see when they walk into my facility is they see powerlifting cages, they see a multitude of bars and trap bars, and they see a whole host of iron. Yeah. And a lot of people who are in back pain have never entered a gym environment. They don't quite understand the thought process that requires you to succeed in this environment. So straight away they look at me and they think, oh golly, this is a guy that's going to put me under a bar or something to that degree. So what I need to do is I need to actually I need to protect them from this environment that they see and create a very secure environment for them to feel comfortable, so that by the time we go down to my room and we start our discussion and the assessment, they feel that they are in an environment that they are comfortable, that they can tell me everything that they need to tell me, so that I can gather the information that puts me in a position to help them as best as I can. Now, so I always recall the story in my course, Steve. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I'll never forget. I remember a Sunday where I was working here at Performance RX, and I had two back consults back to back. And I'd finished with the first lady, and she was probably in her mid-40s, and she lives around the area where my facility is. And she's a very well-to-do individual, got a lot of privileges in life. And so the way that I was talking to her and the way that I was treating her was with a little bit of the cotton-covered gloves, so to speak, because she wouldn't respond to me being extremely aggressive or being too manly or anything to that degree. So the words that I used and my body language changed completely for her. And as soon as she had left, my next consult was standing outside. And you could see this was the complete opposite. This was a gentleman who had definitely been under a lot of weight in his life, and I'm sure had decided to eat a few more different things than just M&Ms to get to the size that he got to. And again, he was tattooed from head to toe. And so straight away, I had to change, but I had to change how I approached him, how I spoke to him, and I shook his hand as hard as I can, because I needed him to believe that I was the person that had the skills to assist him to get out of this black hole of pain that he was in. So that's what I try and impart to every trainer and clinician, is that you need to have the ability to be like a chameleon. You need to adapt to every and any situation that is presented to you. And there's no textbook, Steve, in the world that could ever teach you that. And I must say, I've had phenomenal mentors in my life. I've had a very blessed career to be in the company of people like Stu McGill and even my late karate instructor, who taught me the ability to adapt to every situation. Yeah. So that's what I mean by everything matters, you know. One last story, and Stu will back me up on this. This is an interesting story. I'll never forget, I had a gentleman come and see me from overseas. And I will never forget, I assessed him straight away the minute he walked through my door by looking at the shoes that he was wearing. Right? And I realized, because it was very rare that I'd seen a person wear those particular shoes. But as he walked in and I saw the shoes that he was wearing, I knew that he needed to be a certain personality type or a certain character type to actually go out and spend that amount of money on those pair of shoes. So again, I knew I needed to deal with him in a very specific and in a certain way. And it's been a long journey. I still work with him now as a client, and he's overseas, and it's been a long journey. I didn't get him out of pain and into a good position very, very quickly. Probably took me about 18 months or so. But this gentleman is now doing a whole host of things. And most importantly, he's got his life back where he can now be the father to his kids and the husband to his wife. And that was really the ultimate goal for him. So again, looking, as bizarre as it sounds, looking at the man's shoes allowed me straight away to put on the chameleon cover that I needed to put on to deal with that particular gentleman.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. And you know, a couple of stories that you mentioned there, the point that you mentioned about you know, there's no textbook that you can teach you that. What's been quite interesting is that probably since we last spoke, I maybe touched on it a little bit, but the internship program that we've got has developed a little bit more, and
yep.
It becomes with. Because I've had it before when I first started working, and I'll stumble over words, or I'll try and be a little bit louder when sometimes people want to be a little bit quieter. And I think that comes with just experience of speaking to more people, and then you get a little bit better as you go. You know, a couple of interns have watched me, and there's a couple of the powerlifters or the bigger guys that you mentioned. You know, it's more of a testosterone filled environment. But then on the flip side of it, you know, there might be a session with people who maybe want to be a little bit quieter and don't need that bravado a little bit more, but it's still part of that service as a coach, you know, because I think one thing that the last story that you mentioned there about the guy that you've worked with for the last 18 months, I think it's developing that trust as well. You know, the guy that you said, you know, covered in tattoos and shaking his hands. From there, you know, it's that first signal to be like, okay, I think I can work with this person, which you know, is really important. Just touching on because obviously you mentioned that you might have a phone call before they actually come into the facility to come and see you for the assessment. Have you ever found that what you hear on the phone is something completely different to what they're like in person? Because it's a little bit like, you know, in the comfort of their own home or on the phone, and they don't have to be face to face, they might put a different persona on them once they're in person. Have you had any experience of that?
I have, Steve. And now, when I speak to them on the phone, it's not about me giving them a platform to say whatever they want. I ask them specific questions. And I go through those questions, and the answers to those questions determine as to whether I will take them on as a client or not. Okay. There are many people that I've spoken to on the phone, and literally, Steve, I speak to I can sometimes get to a point where I can speak to 10 people a day, and I stop at that because I just can't spend any more time. Yeah. So I can easily speak to anywhere between 60 to 70 people a week from an inquiry perspective. And the whole thing is that there are many times that I have finished the conversation and I've said to that particular individual, I'm definitely not the guy you want to see. I need to either send you to my surgeon first, or what I would do is I would suggest that if they haven't already read Dr. McGill's book, The Back Mechanic, and then if they're still in a little bit of trouble, then we can speak further and then determine again as to whether I want to see them. And, you know, Steve, the whole thing is this. and clinicians and trainers need to come to terms with this. There's not one clinician or trainer on this planet that has all the skills to help everyone. And when you understand your limitations and when you understand your skills and what you can do with them, you get to a point where you're far more comfortable actually turning people away. And I never used to speak to people. And then something occurred in my career, which was a paradigm shift. This was way back about 4 years ago. And it was after that I made sure that I spoke to everyone on the phone, because again, it made me realize that everything matters. And even speaking to people on the phone, yeah, they can put on a sense of bravado, or they can hide things, but not necessarily that much for me, Steve, because by the time they want to see me, man, they're desperate for help. They really are. And I am not in this business just to take people's money, Steve. So I'm very comfortable turning people away and either referring them to, I've got a whole bunch of clinicians who work in my facility. I've got physical therapists and, some really, really smart people. And I may even turn around to them on the phone and say, absolutely, come to RX. I don't want you to see me. I want you to see my physical therapist. And that's where you're going to start your journey. And then you'll come to see me at a later date. So I always try my best to dispense information that would be helpful to that person, even if it means that they don't come and spend money and time coming to see me.
I think that's a really, really good point. And I think that's sometimes where, especially for coaches that are potentially starting out, that they're a little bit frightened to say no. And for people that are looking for coaches, I think actually, that person might end up coming back to you, or within the group of coaches that you work with might come back to you for something else. It's like that, first point that I mentioned, it's just building that trust and honesty, which is a really, I think it's a really valuable attribute to have. I know I once got a message off someone asking if I could get them stronger for weightlifting. And I said, I can get you stronger in the deadlift and I can get you stronger in the squat, but I can't make you have a better snatch. One, I've never done weightlifting myself, so I wouldn't feel comfortable enough coaching that. And I wouldn't, like what you mentioned about the coach's eye, I wouldn't really know what I was looking for. Yes, I can look at, I've watched weightlifting in the Olympics and I can say, yeah, that was good. But, the finer arts of, the little tweaks that you might need to make, I wasn't willing to work with that person, because if that person got injured whilst I was coaching, I would take it as, my fault that, that has happened. But, 100% getting them stronger, but not specifically to those. But, luckily there's, a couple of weightlifting coaches that I know, and people in other specialist areas that would give them a much better service and help them a lot more than probably what I could do. So I think that's a really good piece of advice that I think sometimes coaches and trainers just want to try and take people on board without thinking that actually it's the needs of that client that needs to be taken first.
Steve, there's this massive wave that is on the internet now that people should become more generalist in their approach to life. They shouldn't specialize. So they're talking about how Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours theory is actually all wrong. I'm not convinced about that. And I do believe that when trainers and coaches start out, they need to start out and create this very large generalist understanding of their industry. You have to. And, I'm sure I've got a lot more gray hairs than you have, Steve. And I've been in this game now I'm going into my 26th year of being a professional coach. So I started my life off reading Flex magazine and Muscle and Fitness and, those bodybuilding magazines years and years ago. And actually my martial arts background, I was heavily involved every month reading the Black Belt magazine. And so that's where I gained that whole generalist understanding. This was way before I even got into the industry, but just the generalist understanding of what do bodybuilders do? What do weightlifters do? What do martial artists do? And then really only over about the last 15 years since I've been working with Dr. McGill, have I gone into being a very specific specialist in a very specific area. People never phone me and say, Joel, I've got a shoulder problem. Can you help me? I'm like, yeah, I understand the shoulder. Of course I do. I've got the generalist knowledge as to how it moves and how it works. But if you've got a major shoulder pathology, hey, I'm really not the guy you want to see. You've got a low back thing going on. I'm more than comfortable to look at you and determine, have I got the skills or haven't I got the skills? And it's the same thing when coaches get involved in athletic training, because I hear this all the time, Steve. I hear personal trainers, they say that they are strength coaches and they understand the mechanics of sport and they can help you in sport. Steve, I've had, again, the honor and the privilege of being involved with some really, really top-end sports people. And I'm going to use an example of when I was the strength and conditioning coach to the Olympic rowing team, the South African Olympic rowing team. And Steve, you put me in a boat, I'm going to capsize. I can't row to save my life, man. However, before my business partner and I in South Africa took on these two absolute phenomenal individuals, what we did is we decided we needed to be students of the game. And those days, we never had the internet. We had VHS videotapes and all those things. And we watched hours upon hours of footage of rowing regattas to understand the mechanics, what goes on, in the boat, and what the rowers have to achieve to cross the line, after 2,000 meters. And we read all the strength and conditioning journals that we could get our hands on with regards to understanding the mechanics of rowing. And it was only once we were in a position of where we felt comfortable to take on these two individuals, and after observing them for many, many hours on the river, then we decided to take them on as our athletes. And we worked with them from 2000 to 2004. And my guys took a third in Athens at the Olympics.
Ah, cool.
And yeah, so, now I didn't take a third, they took a third. Okay. I was the strength coach who gave them probably the ability to protect themselves from themselves. Yeah. All right. That's how I see my role. I didn't do anything to get them that medal. They did it all on their own. And it was really it was my business partner and I, our involvement actually in understanding the mechanics of the sport. So I always say this to trainers because they ask me all the time. They email me and say, Joel, listen, I've just got a basketball player who's come to see me. They need rehab or they want to get strong. What do I do? And my first question to them is, do you understand the sport of basketball? Yeah. If you don't, I suggest you don't take them on. Okay. Yeah. Or if you do want to take them on, I suggest you become a student of the game. And I suggest you spend hours. And now we've got the internet, so you can sit in the comfort of your own home and watch games and watch the mechanics and hear interviews on S&C coaches that work in a specific sport. But it's extremely important to never take on something that you don't know anything about, because it'll come back to bite you. So
yeah, absolutely. I had and I've probably mentioned this before, but one of the coaches that I used to work with now works in professional rugby league. Obviously he's played rugby league himself, but because of the group of players that he works with, yes, obviously he's strong to play rugby league, but a lot of his guys that he works with are already pretty strong. So all he needed to do was make sure that that side of things kept ticking over. But obviously, he needed to make them faster or more explosive, but making sure that they don't lose any strength. And once they start using that strength to be more explosive and try and be a little bit quicker, that they don't injure themselves and hurt themselves. So yeah, I completely agree. And like I mentioned about the weightlifting, it's not a sport that I've done or anything that I've done enough research on to definitely feel confident enough to be able to coach that. One of the things that I just wanted to just touch on there as a little bit of a sideline, and it is when you've mentioned working with maybe a different coach or someone in a specialist area. What are your thoughts on, in terms of, everything matters in actually collaborating with physios or physical therapists to look at other areas to work together with a client? Or would it be a case of, right, I'm going to hand you off to this coach, and then it might be that we might end up coming back and working together?
Steve, I can only speak from my experience,
yeah.
And how people determine how to interpret it and apply it to themselves. I'll leave that up to them. So when I opened Performance RX, I was very, very specific in my thought process and my requirements in making sure that I had enough treatment rooms downstairs to have those treatment rooms occupied with therapists whom I either knew or whom I wanted to work with. And the reason I wanted that, Steve, and my whole career has been like that. Even in South Africa, my gym was like that. And the reason I wanted that is because we have a very strong collaboration between us. So at no stage are my therapists and I fighting for business. So in other words, if, for example, someone wants to come and see me and I need to send them to my physical therapist before they see me, I go and I sit in on that session. And I shut my mouth and I open my ears and I open my eyes and I just watch. And it's got nothing to do with me saying what I feel or anything to that degree. I just watch what the physical therapist is doing with the client. And then at the end of that, we discuss that as to how best to go forward to allow that client to succeed. So the only suggestion I can make to everyone listening, if you're a coach or you're a trainer and you haven't managed to create a network of very smart individuals that you can surround yourself with so that you've got a very strong team to benefit the outcome of your client or patient, I highly suggest you do so. Yeah. Now, it's not so easy to find that piece of the puzzle that fits, Steve, but I've been in the game for so long and I get to read and I know people very quickly. I can pick up on their vibes and, I know if they've got any ulterior motives or anything else. And everyone who works at my facility, I'm extremely, extremely privileged. They are extremely humble, very smart people. And we've got a great team together. Even the surgeons whom I work with, I've got maybe 6 or 7 spinal surgeons who I work with here in London. I get to see them on a weekly, sometimes a monthly basis where I'm going to go observe all their surgeries and we do a whole host of things. And the funny thing is, Steve, I've been out a lot of times with them in a social setting, and that's where I pick up an understanding as to, would I work with this person or wouldn't I work with them? But I will tell you that collaboration between professionals and coaches is extremely important. Because as I said earlier, there's no one person on this planet that's got all the answers for their client. It's impossible. Yeah. So, and sorry, by the way, I never want to have all the answers, right? I just want to be, for me, I want my 10,000 hours. I want to be the specialist, right, in low backs. I'm not interested in shoulders. I'm not interested in ankles. Man, if you've broken your ankle, you don't want to see me. So, and people respect me for that, and I respect people for either their generalist knowledge or their specialized knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting there. You mentioned about, from a social environment, a couple of the coaches that I know, and, if there's something that I get asked or I'm not 100% sure of, I can refer to these, and sometimes it's over a beer or over a coffee or over food. And I think that is a big factor in how to work with them. I've asked people advice on things, and they're willing to help, and that's the same that I'll try and put across with the clients that I work with. I would only refer them to physios, for example. I would only refer them to physios that I know and have worked with before, because from and like what we've mentioned, you're there to help the client. I've had some clients that have been to physios that they feel that they want to go to, then they've gone to another one and then another one, and they've had 3 different answers. I'm like, well, I can't tell you that because I'm not a qualified physio. That's not my knowledge base. But I can refer you to the physio that I know, and I'm going to take the information that they know, and then I can use that a little bit more. So yeah, I think that's a really good point to make. You mentioned there about, if you were sitting in and you were watching the assessment, moving on to the assessment from, you've spoken to the client when you first met them, and going into the assessment, hands-on assessment, forgetting about the world of online that we're on with now. What are you looking for the assessments? Because there's loads of assessments that you can put out there. That's we could probably talk for a long time about all the assessments. But do you have a template that you work on, and then depending on what you're finding, do you delve more down into something that you think is going to be a little bit more of a priority, or do you stick with the same battery of assessments and then change them as you go, depending on what's being highlighted?
Steve, you've asked me two questions, and I'm going to answer those two questions. The first question you asked me is, what am I looking for? Again, I've got to give you the context, all right? So everyone who's watching this knows that I only deal in low back issues, okay? And what I'm looking for specifically is I'm looking to see for two things. I'm looking out for two things. Number one, can I put you in certain positions, or can I change your posture, or can I produce certain loads on your spine that either increase the pain, and then if I change it and modify it, can I decrease and take away your pain?
Yeah.
So I'm looking specifically to see if a mechanical intervention, that's postures, motions, and loads, will either increase and or then take away the mechanical pain. Okay, that's the very first thing I'm looking for, because I know that if I can reduce their pain or take their pain away, I then know that they're most likely going to succeed with a mechanical / exercise-based rehab program. If I get to the point, Steve, of where I can amplify their pain, but I cannot do anything to reduce their pain, whether it's this neural pain that runs down their leg or the localized back pain, and let's say things start getting worse as I move through my assessment, man, I'm time out. I stop straight away. I've got to refer them to my doc. However, because of my pre-assessment phone call, sometimes I can assess that before they even come in here, right? So that's to answer the first portion of your question, that's what I'm looking for. Do I have a template? Absolutely not. Okay, I don't have a template where I'm scoring a 0, a 1, a 2, or a 3, or anything to that degree. I cannot, because every single person is different and every spine is different. Yeah. However, do I have an organization of assessments in my head that I'm going through? Absolutely. But that's not a template, because a template would tell me that, if I go there, then I've got to go here, or I've got to go there. No, I don't have that. That's why what we do, a lot of people in the industry can't come to terms with, because Dr. McGill always says, you've got to learn how to play jazz. It's about playing jazz. Okay. So yes, you do need to play jazz, but I've got the orchestra lined up in my head, right? So I start with the brass, then I go to the strings. And then if something's going wrong with the strings, I'm going to hang around on the strings a little bit longer. Okay. So what I'm trying to do, Steve, is I'm trying to dig down. If they do have pain, I'm trying to dig down to a point of what is specifically causing their pain. So I'm going to do something, Steve, if that's all right for you and your viewers. I'm going to use a little model of mine, right? So this model shows a motion segment. And the motion segment basically means there's two bones and an intervertebral disc, okay? Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Right. So this is an L4, and that's an L5 segment. And here's your intervertebral disc. This is your stomach, and here's your back. So when I place my hand on your back, that's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling these little bony protrusions. Okay. A lot of people say, oh, I can feel your disc. No, you can't. Disc is very, very far in. Okay. Yeah. Now, what can happen, Steve, is when I'm testing, let's say I'm taking a power lifter, for example, and let's say the power lifter says to me, Joel, I get a lot of pain when I bend forward, but I get even more pain actually when I arch back. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to determine that if I bend them forward, is there anything occurring at their disc? I'll just use this here. So in other words, do they start to increase that disc bulge, right? So let's say they've decided that they want to deadlift with a rounded back, and every time they do that, it starts creating pain, okay? So I'm testing to see if the disc is involved, but I'm also going to, if they tell me that arching back hurts them, I'm also going to test the facet joint, because when I arch back like that, can you see how I start to provoke the facet joint as well? So the goal of my assessment is to determine what structure is causing their pain. And once I know which structure is the more provocative, I'm then going to hang around on that structure or on those particular movements for a longer time. Because the gentleman might say to me, okay, Joel, I really get a lot of pain at the lockout. So as I get to the top of the deadlift and I overarch, okay, and I can feel the pain in my back. And then if I'm lying on my stomach, maybe watching my iPad or doing something to that degree, the pain, that same familiar pain. So that means that they've got an extension-based problem going on. And I need to hang around on extension motions and also the structures that may be provoked on extension. So that's essentially where my head is going in the assessment, because Steve, that then directs me to what my rehab and long-term training program is going to be.
Yeah. So with that, touching on those assessments, because sometimes, obviously you've mentioned there that, if you'll start off with your brass and then work around like the analogy used there, obviously, are there obvious things that you're looking for? Because then sometimes when you're doing an assessment, for example, if you're watching someone do a squat, just to look at the squat, and we mentioned that coach's eye, it can look okay. Maybe the knee's going a little bit, but then obviously the assessment that you're going to do are going to be a little bit more hands-on. So is that delving into a little bit more detail rather than starting off broad and just maybe looking for the obvious, if that makes sense?
Okay, great question. So I don't start off with my assessment hands-on. Yeah. I start off, the first part of my assessment is an interview. And that interview, Steve, can last 45 minutes to an hour. And that particular person who I am working with will go through everything. I want to know what hurts them, what doesn't hurt them, what gives them relief. They need to describe their pain. And very, very importantly, Steve, I delve quite deep into their physical history. So I want to know what they did as a youngster. Let's say they're in their 40s. I want to know what they played, sports they played at school. I want to know how long they've been doing weight training for. I want to know, do they, when they deadlift and squat, are these the 2 and the 1 RM type guys, or are these the recreational 8 rep deadlift people? Because every injury forms a cluster. And what I mean by that is the person who comes in and says to me, Joel, I've been lifting for 6 months. I lift maybe 40 kilos. I put 40K on a bar and I deadlift for 10 reps because I want to lose a bit of body fat and I want to do body transformation stuff. They are going to have a very, very different injury to the power lifter who comes in and says to me, Joel, right, I put 130 or 150K on my back, right, and I squat 3 days a week, and I do 2 and 3 RMs, because the spine and the structures and the tissues adapt to the loads that are being borne through that structure. So straight away, that takes my head to a very particular direction, or in a particular direction. So the way that I'm going to treat the lady who comes in that's never lifted a weight in her life and just does yoga is going to be very different to the guy who comes in who's been powerlifting for the last 20 years of his life. Because the powerlifter is going to have sclerotic or calcified bones. He's going to have bony growths that are starting to form around, where the exiting nerve roots are. Maybe in actual fact, the bone has enlarged from all the load that has been, taken through the spine. Whereas the lady who's doing yoga, that's never, put any substantial weight through her spine in a gym, is going to have a very mobile spine, and there's different structures that are going to be at play with regards to her pain triggers versus the powerlifting guy. So again, I've already created a hypothesis in my head before I even put my hands on them. And what that means though, Steve, is once I've created that hypothesis, I now know whether I should start with the strings or whether I should start with the brass section. Okay. If I've got a powerlifter, I'm not even going to start with the strings. I'm going to go straight to the brass section and hang around there. He may throw me a curveball because I may go to the brass section and my hypothesis is completely wrong. And I now need to change tack completely and go to the strings, right? Because maybe he's just dealing with something that's a bit of an anomaly. Maybe there's just something not quite right. That's why a template doesn't work. Yeah. And the only way that I can get good at what I'm doing is to see as many people as I can. And Steve, over the last 15 years, man, I've seen thousands of people, and constantly, before they even get to me, constantly I'm creating this idea in my head, where am I going to go with them?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because you mentioned there that you might start focusing on one thing, but then you might have to change your plan a little bit. With that, obviously, with the things that you're focusing on, what are your thoughts on? Are you just trying to fix or reduce the pain on one specific part that you found from the assessment, rather than trying to fix everything at once? Because from the assessment, other things might crop up, but obviously you're going to categorize in what's going to be the most important one. So are you just going to focus on that one thing rather than try and fix everything all at once? And do you think that that's where sometimes when coaches and trainers are assessing and looking to help the clients, that they're like what we mentioned about being that generalist, trying to cover all the bases rather than trying to focus that one issue, and then once that's once we've sorted that one, then we're going to move on to the next thing?
Plain and simple, Steve. Well, first and foremost, because in my head everything matters, I'm just going to again lay the context for everyone. I don't fix anything.
Yeah.
I'm not a fix-it man. What I am is I'm the type of guy that wants to expose as deeply as possible what is going on, and we're going to formulate a plan to give the client the tools to look after themselves. Okay, which hence why I'm not a fix-it man. So on that basis, first and foremost, my initial question to that particular person is, what hurts you the most? Show me, right? And if they grab a dowel stick in my office, or if they come up to the gym and they put a bar on their back and they squat and they say, Joel, that is the worst pain that I've ever experienced, okay, is when I squat or whatever I do, I need to address that. And then through my assessment, I can hone in on the structure. As I said, is it the disc? Is it the vertebral body? Is it the facet joint? And once I can hone in on what is going on, that gives me the ability to give them the best plan so that they can look after themselves. And if we get to a point where we create the resolution for that particular pain, and then there are other things that we need to modify. Let's say I'm looking at how they squat, and I realize that there's something going wrong with the hip, or there's something going wrong with the knee. We can deal with that. Yeah. So let me give you a more of a real world example, Steve. I, purely by default, I have become very, very exposed to hip pathologies, because the spine and the hip, they are very, very closely related. I'm going to use my other model here. So if you take a look here, all right, so if we're looking at L5 and S1, then you've got your sacroiliac joints. So generally what happens is, what occurs at the hip joint itself, okay, either good or bad, has a consequence on the next joint up, which is L5 and S1, okay, and then further on up the spine. So there's many times that people have come into me and said, oh, Joel, I'm experiencing this most bizarre back pain. I ask them to do what movement is causing them the problem, let it be a lunge or whatever it is, okay? I then do my assessment, and at the end of my assessment, okay, I can conclusively turn around and say to them, your back's not the problem. It's your hip,
Yeah.
right? Because what I've done is I've got to the point of where the only way that I can replicate and provoke that same pain is when I provoke their hip joint, not their back. I'm very confident to know that we need further imaging, or we need scans or whatever, or they need to see my hip surgeon to determine what the next best step is. So it's because there's such a close synergy between the hip and the spine, as I say, by default, I'm starting to become quite confident. Confidence is not a good word. Quite proficient in understanding how the hip functions in relation to the spine. So again, Steve, the assessment directs me, man. I will never give an exercise. I don't care who it is. I don't give out exercises. I don't give out programs. You want something from me, then I need some skin in the game. And skin in the game is I need to assess you, because I've got no idea what you can and cannot do.
Yeah, that's it's interesting that you mentioned there being a fix it guy, and just on that, because why I asked about the whole assessment type of things, because when it does come to everything matters, that will change as you go, and the more you change the assessments, rather than like what you mentioned, if this equals this is going to change to there. In terms of the assessments and thinking that right, well, this is what I need to go through, and start having the process of what we need to give to the client. Is that where sometimes you think coaches and trainers potentially go wrong, thinking that things need to be fixed, or that problem needs to be solved, rather than, like what you say, giving people the tools to actually look after themselves for the long term?
Steve, I think the thing is this is, again, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for any other trainer or any other practitioner. I never want people to rely on me. Okay. I want to be a vehicle to give them the tools to look after themselves. Now, if the client chooses to train with me 3 days a week, or they are a particular athlete, or they're a particular person that requires my skills and not my trainers, or they can't do it on their own, hey, of course, I'm going to assist you. And I've got clients like that. I'll give you an example. I'm currently looking after a particular female musician, and she came to me and she requires my skills on she sees me 4 or 5 days a week, because she's touring. She tours the world, and she does her music concerts, and I have the ability to keep her head clear to do her music. Yeah. Right. So I'm not her fix-it man. I'm just the guy that's allowing her or empowering her to forget about what's going on in her back, and she can go off and do her concert to 80,000 people. Okay. So, but at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is I still need people to look after themselves. I need people to be empowered to know that if they have a little bit of a relapse of their back pain, they know exactly what to do. They know how to pull themselves back, and how to create that sort of that base of a pain-free position. Because at the end of the day, if I don't impart education, if I don't impart an empowerment environment or an empowering environment to that particular client and or patient, I'm not doing my job, man. Because you don't want to come and see me. I'm not going to manually massage you or click your back 4 or 5 days a week. That's not my skill. And that's not to dismiss the skills of practitioners who do that. So the only thing that I've got in my toolbox is, right, let's look at your body. Let's look at what your creator gave you. Let's look at the shape of your hips. Let's look at the size of your spine. Some people have got long spines. Some people have got short spines. Some people have got really large vertebral bodies, right? So these aren't all the same. They're different from person to person. So if we can empower that person and educate them, they then know what they can and cannot do to put themselves in a far better position for long-term success. If I then become someone who they're happy to see on a weekly basis or whatever, hey man, of course, that's part of my commitment to this industry is that I will train people and help them as much as they want to. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to disempower them. Not at all.
I think that was, two really good words there that I think are really important when it comes to as a coach, empowering people and educating. And it does come back sort of, full circle, if you like, when we're talking about everything matters, that and following on from asking that question, because I find that quite an interesting question, and I quite liked your explanation on that, because when it's thinking about if you fix something and then, right, you fixed, that's it, I'll see you again, if it happens again. Then that client comes back and, oh, well, it happened again. Okay, well, let's try and fix you again, rather than having the tools to be there. Because it's the same with an example with nutrition. Okay, well, I can't be in the shops with you all the time to say, right, make sure you get some vegetables, make sure you get some protein. At some point, they've got to go out there, by themselves. But 100%, if, like what you mentioned about, if someone does hurt the back again, you're there as a buffer to just reset, get back to neutral. Okay, we realise what's happened, and then you can go from there. And that's why I kind of wanted to pick your brains in terms of why does everything matter, because it is a bigger picture rather than just I like what you're saying with the template of, well, this equals this, so we're going to focus on this, rather than I remember speaking about you in the first chat that we had. It's based on the person. It's based on that person, because everyone is, an individual, which, I find really, really interesting. And that's how, I've learned from speaking to coaches such as yourselves, and for everyone else listening, to think, look, take it on a case-by-case basis. Have those things in the background that you need to maybe add in the assessment. But yeah, don't think that, oh, well, I can overlook this because, or that doesn't matter because on my assessment, this equals this, so it must be that, rather than actually taking a whole bigger picture into account.
Steve, everything matters. Yeah. Everything. I must tell you something. And the person, as I say, the person that imparted that onto me wasn't just Stu McGill. He's had a phenomenal influence on Everything Matters, because Stu takes everything into consideration. But even, as I say, my karate teacher, my karate instructor when I was a kid, who played a massive part in my formative years, said to me, Joel, everything matters. Every time you walk onto that dojo floor, the way that you conduct yourself, the way that you respect your fellow karate athletes, the reason that we bow every time we walk into the dojo, it's not a religious thing. It's expressing gratitude for the environment to allow us to sharpen ourselves as individuals. And hence why, for me, everything matters. Steve, it goes so far as my reception, okay, and my staff at reception. For them, all right, how do you greet the person walking into my facility? Do you make them feel very welcome and comfortable? Or is there an antagonistic response straight away where the person doesn't feel comfortable? And if that ever occurs, man, we're going to have a serious conversation, because I want this environment, whenever a person walks into this environment, I want them to know that we're taking every single thing into consideration for them. I will go 1,000,000 miles for every single person who walks into this facility, Steve. And there's no question about that. I will go to the ends of the earth. I don't care if it's a person who comes to see me once, or if it's a person who sees me 5 days a week and spends a huge amount of money with me. It makes no difference. All right, I treat everyone the same, and everything matters, man. So that's just how I see things.
Yeah, and it's something that as I'm developing as a coach, and probably the more experience that I'm getting, and having seen you putting that content out there, it does sort of it does make you think. And what you mentioned there actually made me smile about when people first come in to the gym. I'm the same when they're coming to reception as well. So sometimes, depending on the person that comes in, especially sometimes if I had my hair cut really short and I've got a little bit of a beard, I never want people to feel intimidated or anything like that, because then that way they're going to they might put the blockers up, and then I might not be able to get the information out of them. And I always say that the gym or the training environment is very different depending on the person. But the common theme amongst all of it is that it should be a place that they feel comfortable enough to, one, let me know, whether that exercise causes pain or where we can go from there. So, I think that was a really good chatting, explaining, that point of everything matters, because I think sometimes it can get mentioned quite a lot, but the actual reasoning behind it and actually taking into account that, it isn't just what you're finding from the assessment, it's when they're coming into the gym and when you see them as a person. So for everything that we chatted about there, and for everyone listening, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom?
Golly. When people ask me about words of wisdom, I never think of myself as a wise person to disseminate information or words of wisdom. What I would say is this, Steve, just to summarize it, is that listen to everything and believe nothing, first and foremost, right? And then go off and learn more so that you can believe certain things, okay? Because there are certain truths in life that will sit well with you. And for the young trainers and coaches out there, try to find an assessment protocol, whatever it may be. It could be the FMS, it could be anything, okay? And this is not me selling anything, okay, or dismissing the genius of people that have put phenomenal assessments out there. But always try to make sure that your prescription of exercise at least has some type of connection to an assessment. All right, whatever that assessment is. All right, and that's why I always say, people ask me constantly about the FMS. Is it good? Is it bad? Hey, man, I did the FMS, and all my trainers have done it. And do we use parts and pieces of it? Of course we do. I don't personally use it anymore because I only deal with low back clients. But the thing is that try to match what you give out. There needs to be an understanding and a reasoning for why you give an exercise. Don't just randomly give it because, you saw it on Instagram and it looks cool, or it's, some Instagram influencers showing you how to do it, and all of a sudden she's got the best, beach body in the entire world. There needs to be a reason. There needs to be a why. Why are you doing that? Right? So if anyone ever says to you, you gave me this exercise, why did you do it? You don't become tongue-tied and twisted, right? You've got a very good reason. Now, the reason could be right, it could be wrong, and who knows? I don't know, right? But in your head, you've at least calculated things. You've thought about things. You've given it some consideration, and it's not just, just do this because it's great. I was talking to a really smart friend of mine yesterday, Steve, and we were having a long conversation. He's based in the US. He's a good close mate of mine, and being a little bit more involved. There needs to be something a little bit more in depth. And if someone says to you, why are you doing it? And you say, well, at the moment, I don't quite know why, but I'm in the process of researching and getting an understanding, and I'll come back to you on that. At least that's an answer, But don't just randomly give out stuff without actually understanding why the hell you're doing it, man.
Yeah.
Because I don't, it's just, for me, I could never ever put myself in a position where I give out an exercise and I say, well, just do this because it's going to do something. I'm far too cautious to do that, Anyway.
Some great, take home points from there. And what's been a good sort of underlying common theme, I think, throughout this podcast is, and sort of in the summary that you've put there, is have pride in the work that you do and have a professionalism about it, rather than just, you know, throwing a bunch of exercise together with no real purpose behind it. You know, I'd much rather give people 3 or 4 exercises that I know they're going to help them, rather than 10 exercises that I have no idea whether they're going to help, but it makes them look cool.
Absolutely. And Steve, and that's the thing, you know, unfortunately, I get to hear this all the time, which I'm sure many other people do, that, you know, personal training is a bit of a joke, and it's the career you're going to do because you can't do anything else, or you're not educated to do anything else. And I take high offense to that, because I'm a trainer, right? I'm an S&C coach. And the thing for me is I have a phenomenal love for this industry, not for the social media aspect of it, because that's just not where my head is, but I have a love for what I do. And there's not a day in 25, nearly 26 years of being a professional coach, there's not a day that I've hated my job ever. Because the day that occurs is the day I'm done, man. I'm finished. But I cannot wait to see people. I cannot wait to assess people. I cannot wait to get on the road and teach and educate people. I cannot wait to be on the road again with my team, Backfoot Pro and Stu and Ed, and doing our things and just empowering the people out there who want to increase the professionalism of our industry, both the clinical side and also the training side. And when I get these guys on social media who are negative about their industry, whether it be physical therapy or anything else, and they start complaining and they start saying that this is junk and that's rubbish, and it's nasty. It's not something that I would ever want to perpetuate in our industry. That's why I rather just keep quiet and do the work that I do, is because I love the industry. I take pride in the industry. I take pride in my job. I take pride in my facility, and every single client affects me. If they don't succeed, okay, trust me, Steve, you can ask anyone who's close to me, man, if I ever get an email from a client that says, Joel, I'm just not getting through this, or it's not working and I've got to refer them on, man, I take that to heart. Okay. It really, it cuts me. It truly does. So I'm in total agreement with you, man. Every trainer, every coach, take pride in what you do and understand that every single thing matters. Everything you say, the way you greet someone, the way you look at someone, the way you touch someone, the way, you know, you write an email to them, everything matters. Don't be casual.
Absolutely, and you know, that's why, you know, I enjoyed speaking to you the very first time I spoke to you, and you know, loved having you on again, and that's why, you know, having you as a guest, and for everyone listening to you know, put content out there that is only positive for you know, the health and fitness industry for strength and conditioning, you know, and giving actual people useful information. And exactly there, you know, what actually made me laugh when you said about you know, how you greet and how you speak to somebody. I like having a little bit of a laugh and a joke when the sessions are up and running. And in my head, I said something that I thought was quite funny, but someone obviously didn't have the similar sense of humor.
Yeah.
When that person sort of says, look, I didn't appreciate that, I'm the exact same. I never want, I want everyone to feel comfortable in the gym, and if it's actually my fault that I've caused that, I'll do everything that I can to be, you know, apologize and make that next session better for them, so that they feel comfortable. Thanks a lot for taking the time to chat with me, Joel. Really liked catching up with you. For everyone listening who either didn't listen to the last time that we spoke, or want to see the content that you're you know, putting out there, or maybe even ask you, any coaches out there that might have any questions about what we've chatted about, where can people find you?
Steve, probably the easiest place to find me is performancerx.co.uk. That's my company website. I am on Instagram. My Instagram is joelperform_rx. I am starting to become a little bit more comfortable with Instagram as it goes on. I'm not going to put out, you know, the best exercises for back pain. It's just not, that's not professional enough. But if people want to follow me on Instagram, I am answering questions on there, and I'll do Q&As and those type of things. But if they want to contact me, Performance RX, go to the contact form, and I'm around, man. So, I'd be more than happy to answer any of your viewers' questions. And it would be my absolute pleasure. And, more than anything, Steve, thank you for having a platform, for allowing people like myself and all the other amazing guests that you've had on Strength Chat, to have a platform to disseminate and put out information that is hopefully useful to your listeners. And if we can just change one person, just one thought for one person, then I've done my job. Because if there's one person out there who hears this and is able to apply it and increase the professionalism of what they do and be more proud of their work, then I'm extremely grateful for that. And I'm extremely grateful for you to hosting this wonderful platform. So thank you very much.
No worries at all. Thanks a lot for taking the time to, jump on. And, I can't agree more with, I think there can be a lot of information that isn't very useful that's put out there, or things that are just for cool, just because it looks cool. So yeah, I am a big believer in, if that you're going to put something out there, it might not be the coolest looking thing in the world or anything like that, but yeah, if one person can take something away from it, and take some content, and it's useful for the clients that they're working with, or even for people listening who are looking for a coach or a trainer, to give them a little bit more direction on what they're looking for, then that's awesome. Thanks again, Joel. Absolutely loved it. Yeah. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.